YouTube people, what is going on? Northeast Ohio, cards and comics, talking some comic books today. We've not dove into strictly comic books, and it feels like forever because of the National, Marvel cards, PSA returns, XMen metal. It's just been a hot minute since we kind of dove in and looked at some good old CGC slabs. So for those that don't follow the ins and outs of the comic book market, there has been it's kind of like a weird roller coaster ride. Um, you know, a lot of stuff spiked in April, May, started pulling back in June, July, and then other stuff is spiking now. And it's all kind of built around MCU spec and who's going to show up in what movies, this, that, and the other thing. Now, what happened in the spring, late spring, early summer, and late winter, really, was kind of like a rising tide, lifted all the boats. Back in February, March, we had a lot of Spider-Man stuff going crazy. Then that led into X-Men stuff going crazy. And WandaVision stuff. And then, the normal MCU show stuff. And right now, Kang stuff is going crazy. And now people are starting to spec on the next wave of shows. The Hawkeye show is coming. There's a Spider-Man movie coming. There's an Eternals movie coming. Fantastic Four stuff is coming down the line. So there's these ebbs and flows. And I basically strictly collect Marvel, and I am a big X-Men guy. And it's interesting watching the market do these ebb and flows as someone that plays in both markets. I'm in the sports card market primarily and come over to the comic book side to dabble on occasion, if you will. Now, I got a little bit lucky because the sports card market went through a major correction in prices peaked in February and March and then have been on a pretty big pullback up until the last month or so, where things have kind of flattened out. And now it looks like things are getting back to normal again on the sports card side. While that was going on, when prices were at an all-time high in the sports card world, I was not buying a lot of sports cards because I was buying a lot of comic books in January and February. When the comic book prices were starting to take off, I was trying to buy as many as I could before the prices got out of control. So I got lucky and I got into New Mutants 98 at a relatively affordable price compared to today. Like Edge of Spider-Verse, Fallout 4, a lot of X-Men stuff. But I missed the wave on a lot of stuff. And what we're noticing now is some of those key X-Men books got that hype and buzz about, the X-Men are going to be coming to the MCU. And I think a lot of that was driven by some of the WandaVision stuff with Quicksilver showing up and people thinking that was going to lead to more things. And, the spec machine was, the internet rumor mongering machine was rolling and caused a lot of people just chasing X-Men everything. Well, now, just like the sports card world, we've kind of moved on to the next thing. Now everyone wants Kang and Spider-Man stuff again, and this, that, and the other thing. And they're kind of forgetting about the X-Men a little bit. So I think it's creating some interesting buying opportunities. So we're going to look at a couple. I picked out like 4 or 5 different books that I want to look at. One of the biggest ones is Giant Size X-Men #1. That's, the one I have up on the screen here. That's one I personally missed the boat on, and I would really like to own one. But they got pretty pricey. But a lot of stuff is starting to see pullback as the pool of comic book money shifts from X-Men stuff to other things. So what I wanted to do today is just kind of go over some interesting price charts. And it appears that there are some chances to get back in on this stuff. It's going to be more expensive than it was in December and January, but it's a lot cheaper than what it was when it peaked in May and June. For most of this stuff, the timing varies a little bit depending on the specific book, but in general. And here's the reason why I would like to dive back in to not just these books, but I just pulled these as examples. There's a million different ways you could go with X-Men stuff. Here's the thing. The X-Men are 100% coming to the MCU. There is no doubt about it. It's just a matter of when, and it might be a while because they have their slate planned out. And it's going to be interesting how they bring them in and, the whole 9 yards. But go look at what the stuff did with WandaVision. Go look at what Kang stuff is doing right now. and any other MCU go collect, spike, spec, chase, whatever you want to call it. Imagine that when X-Men stuff actually starts getting announced and confirmed. What are those prices going to do? Because prior to the MCU, the X-Men were the most popular thing in Marvel comic books. And that was even prior to the Fox movies. The X-Men were the number one most popular Marvel property. Fox had the rights. MCU was born. That's taken over. And now, Iron Man, Spider-Man, the Avengers are probably the most popular thing. But there's a lot of X-Men fans out there. A lot. And they're going to go crazy when trailers start dropping or spec starts dropping. And this stuff is going to shoot right back up again. I have no doubt about it. It might be a while. That's the thing. It could be a couple years from now. But as I've talked about a ton on the channel when talking about comic books, the reason why I like to diversify into them is because the floors are so high. In my opinion, most of these blue chip, I'm going to call them keys to minor keys of X-Men stuff. Giant Size X-Men #1 is a true blue chip book. Some of this other stuff we're going to talk about would not be qualified as that, but I still feel they're pretty safe because they're always going to have a very decent floor to them. It's not like a sports card where a guy tears an ACL and then, or whatever, does something stupid off the field and they're just toast. And the values go to practically nothing. That is not going to happen if you buy key books, regardless whether it's X-Men or whatever. So let's dive into a couple of the ones that I picked out and just kind of like show you guys how this stuff spiked up and is now pulled back. And I'm not saying run out and buy these specific books. As always, what we say around here, do your own homework. These are just ones that caught my eye, and you could just kind of see the pattern of this stuff dipping back down again. And if you missed the boat, there could be opportunity to hop on these or other X-Men keys. So I think I forgot to say at the beginning, smash the sub button, like, comment, all that jazz. So Giant Size X-Men #1, probably the #1 comic book on my want list. But it's going to be one of those ones that it's just going to take a commitment for me to save up the money and pull the trigger on it. I should probably do it sooner rather than later, but that's the problem with playing on both sides, both sports cards and comic books. One is always taking money from you for something that seems like it's a bigger priority. So one day I will have one, hopefully sooner rather than later, and it doesn't have to be in a high grade. I'd be perfectly fine with like a 5, 6 or under, even like a 3, 5 if it looked good. I just want something that presents well to display. And to hold long term. So, but Giant Size X-Men #1 pricing, I went with a 6.0 here because it's just kind of smack in the middle, but it also had a decent amount of transactions. And you can see this thing spiked way up in the spring, March, April. And now we're using GPA analysis here, has pulled back down again. This is going back down again. Now, the question is, we talk about this in sports cards all the time. How low is this going to go? Are you catching the falling knife or did it already hit the floor? Here's the thing that we say on that side. Sometimes don't get cute. If the price seems good, just pull the trigger. Don't try to time the market, especially if it's something that you're willing to sit on long term. Like, in my opinion, Giant Size X-Men #1. Once X-Men stuff starts getting out again, I could see this thing going right back up to the moon. So let's just look at some recent pricing. You could see back in January, February, it was between a $2,000 and $3,000 book. And then in March, it started shooting up into the 4s, got into the high 4s. You see a couple of 5s in there, and then stuck there all through April and May. And then in June, it started slowly coming back down again. I mean, we still see a $4,800 price point here in late June. And now look, they're not selling as often. We have a 4,500 here on July 20th, then on July 25th, and then August 1st. But when you go back to April and May, look at how often they were selling. Part of the reason is because I have this on a saved eBay search list. There's not a lot of people putting them up for auction right now. And there's a lot on the market, so people could be picky. So they don't have to just run out and slam the buy it now button on a Giant Size X-Men. There are a lot on eBay. So people are waiting for auctions to come up, and you can see when the auctions come up, they go for a fair amount less, which is probably the true market value because other stuff's sitting out there and people aren't willing to pull the trigger on it. So the prices have pulled back. Uh, Once again, it's how low do we think that they go? One has not sold under $4,000 since March 31st, when one went for $39.99 in a 6.0. And now we have this one at 3,800. And like I said, pretty much everything in between, all the way up to the low fives. I don't think this gets all the way back down to 2K. I would love to see this settle in around 3, but I don't know that it gets that low. Um, and like I said, a lot of people are just not auctioning these off. They're trying to hold to the older pricing comps, at least for the time being, because they're obviously not super motivated to sell. It's not like they need the money. We don't know what their buying price was. So, but Giant Size XMen is definitely one that is on my radar in regards to, boy, if this thing keeps dipping, there's going to be a play to be made there. Because once again, I like it long term, 2, 3, 4 years from now, because that's how long it could be. We don't really know when the X-Men are going to show up, but at some point they're going to, and when they do, this stuff is going to go crazy. And if I bought a Giant Size X-Men #1, personally, I probably would not be looking to sell it, even if prices went nuts. X-Men 129. This one got super wild. This is a very interesting one. It's part of Dark Phoenix. It's a multiple key. It's the first appearance of both White Queen and Kitty Pryde, and I think others. I can't remember if there's other Hellfire Club members that are first appearance in here. But this is a massive issue. It's a cool looking cover. This one is on my list to pick one of these up. I've always wanted one of these, but boy, did they get expensive. This is a CGC 9.8. This got all the way up, and this is kind of a rogue sale. This one went for $10,100 back in late May, right after one sold for $6,300, another one sold for $68, another one sold for $7. There was a 9.2 in there too mixed in. I'm going to throw those out as outliers, but we definitely see plenty of 6K plus sales of this. There's a 66, a 6, a 63, a 68, a 7, a 48, and a 58. But this was another one. You go back to the beginning of the year, and this book always did pretty well because it's a multiple key. Kitty Pryde and White Queen are both very popular characters, and you get 2 for the price of 1 in a book. And this is not super high census either. In a 9.8, I think there's only 120 of them. And even in a 9.6, there's not a ton of them. There's like 600 or 700 in a 9.6 and like 150 or 200 in a 9.8. Could be wrong on that. But back in January, February, $2,000 to $3,000, and then it just started going bonkers here in the spring, just like everything else. Actually, none sold in May, interestingly enough. So 2,000 to 3,000 through February. We get into April, it pops up to 3.3. Then it goes to 4.7. Then there's this weird one in there, and then 6.6, 6, 6.3, 6.8, 7, 4.8, 5.8, 4.6, and now we're back down to the low fours. And then one just sold yesterday for 4,200, which is not that much more than what it was going for back in February, $800 or $900. I feel like, and you can actually see, and we'll see if this holds or not. There's the spike up going down, and then it looks like it's starting to make a turn to level off. I don't know that I see this going back down to 3K. This is a very sought after book and a very sought after run with very sought after first appearances. I don't see this one dropping a ton more. It already had quite a big pullback from 6K to 4K. And I think it kind of floats right around that 4K to high threes, maybe if you could find a deal on one. But this is one I would definitely be looking to pick up on a dip if I could find one. I would not personally be looking at a 9.8. That's a little out of my price range for most comic books. I usually like to try to stay sub $2,000. I think the most I ever spent on a book was 13 or 1400. An ASM 252 and a New Mutants 98. My New Mutants 98 was like 1100, and my ASM 252 was like 12 or 1300, I think. But that's usually the range I try to stay in. And that's just my own personal budgeting. Something that higher end, there's bigger sports cards that I would buy that are just a little bit easier to move. And here's the thing: when I buy comic books, I'm not buying them to flip them per se. I have bought a lot of comic books in the last year. I have not sold a single comic book in the last year. I have bought and sold a ton of sports cards in the last year, but I have not sold a single comic book since I started buying them again about a year and a half ago now. So for me to buy a comic book, that's taking money out of my fun money pile. Whereas if it's for sports cards, I'm constantly buying and selling on the sports card side and building that fund up bigger and bigger. And when I buy a comic book out of it, it takes out of, the play money fund, if you will. I don't think I've ever really talked about this on the comic book videos for those that don't watch both. I am very rigid and very pro setting up card/comic money, and that is kept separate from real money. I call it fake money and real money. Real money is what you pay for your groceries, your house payment, your car payment, your electric bill. Fake money is money that you make off the hobby, however you make it, whether it's content creator, buying and selling comics or cards, buying and selling comic book cards, whatever your side hustle is, or maybe you just split a little money off from your real money, goes into the fake money pile, and you use fake money to buy all this nonsense. That's personally how I do it. You do you, but I do that to specifically protect myself and set limits in place for myself so I don't do something stupid and run up a big credit card bill or spend outside of my means. So I only spend money on collectibles that I earn from other collectibles. Now, I didn't start that way. I set money aside, slowly build it up, smaller into the bigger, into the bigger, into the bigger. And, it's like a snowball rolling down a hill. If you keep making smart decisions, you're going to have some losers in there every once in a while. But in general, you keep building that up and it allows you to build bigger and better things. So that's how I have built most of my card and comic book collection, other than the initial seed money, if you will. So when I look at books, I usually don't like to go something this high because it takes too much money out of that pool. Because then it's leaving that pool, because I'm not going to be selling the comic books to put money back into that pool. That's just the way I treat it. I am definitely more of a collector on the comic book side of things than the sports card side of things, for sure. Sorry for the long side rant there, but just kind of explain a little bit of my thought process for why I look at what I look at. So yeah, 133 or 129 rather. Big fan of this one. Would love to track one of these down. This is right up there for me. It's not on the level of like a giant size XMen #1 or a Hulk 181 or like an XMen 101, First Appearance of Phoenix. Those are probably like my three really big ones. This one I would probably hit fourth. I'm a big fan of Kitty Pryde and White Queen. I like both those characters, and I really love this cover. And plus, it's part of Dark Phoenix. I would like to put the whole Dark Phoenix run together at one point in time. Moving on, with just a couple more to talk about. XMen 244, first appearance of Jubilee. Very popular character. This one's also come down quite a bit. This peaked up. These got all the way up to almost $600 at one point in time, with some high sales even higher. Right now, it's settled back in, and actually, it looks like a pick back up again. There were a couple deals there. Missed the boat on this one. I do not have this book, and I wouldn't mind one. This one kind of pops around a little bit. And a lot of these have sold. This is not a super hard book to find. Back in the early spring / or late winter, early spring, this was $200 to $300, and then, as noted with other things, when you get into April and May, it shoots up to $500-600, some upwards of $700, but it mostly sits between like $550 and $650. Right now, you could find them for under $5. You see a $480, a $460, a $420, a $545 most recently, $444. This is another one. If it got down to like $4, I wouldn't mind pouncing on one of these. I think Jubilee is she's not on the cover here, but I think Jubilee is very likely to be one of the X-Men characters that comes back, or would be shortly introduced after, the first movie, or depending on how they do it. She just seems like a very logical fit for a modern day X-Men team. And she's very popular. She's very popular in the Saturday morning cartoon, and just has a big fan base. So I can see this one easily spiking back up again. And it's nice because you can get it in a 9.8 for a fairly reasonable price at $400 to $600. Uncanny X-Men 266. First full appearance of Gambit. Don't get me into the whole cameo versus first full thing. This is another one I would put pretty high up on my list, just because I kind of grew up with Gambit. I remember when this book actually came out. One of my buddies had it, and I remember borrowing to read it, and I really wanted to trade him for it, but he would not trade it away because he was a big Gambit fan as well. And for whatever reason, I never got one. It was like $20 back in the day if you missed the initial boat on it, and as a kid, that was a ton of money. So I just never grabbed one in my collection. But I would still like to track one down in a 9.8 at one point in time. Once again, this is not a super low pop book. You could find this laying around fairly easily. And it's kind of settled back in at around $1,000. It did spike up quite a bit. If you go back into the early part of the year, once again, you can see how many sales there are on this. This was a $600 book pretty much all day. And then it very quickly got to 1,000. Then it very quickly got up for a brief minute to the mid thousands, like 12, 13, 14, even 1,500 at some points. But it has pulled back down and is basically sitting firm at around 1,000. This is one of those ones, and I can tell you exactly what's going to happen here. Because it happened to me once already when it was a $600 book. There was always something more important for me to get, so I just bought that instead. And I was like, that thing always goes for $600. I'll get one eventually, no big deal. And then, of course, everything shot up, and I missed the window. And now it's come back down again, and I'm having the same conversation with myself. Oh, that's $1,000 all day long. I could pretty much find one whenever I want one. I'll just get it whenever. And I already know what's going to happen. Something is going to happen to cause movement on this book again, and it's going to spike again. And then it'll be, it'll go up to 2,000 and then pull back to 1,500. And I'll be having the same conversation with myself. This is one of those ones I just need to get out of the way and just knock it out and be done with it. And grab one for around $1,000 and just be done. Put it in the pile, check it off the list, and move on to the next thing. But this is another one, like I said, it's spiked up and is now settled back down again at its kind of what I'm going to call its new floor at around $1,000. So once again, this is like a point of what I was getting to at the beginning of the video. If you miss the window on this stuff, you're not going to get it back at the January prices, December and January prices. But by coming back into the market now, you're not getting it at peak prices like it was in April, May, and June. You're getting it on the cool side of the run up and the pullback. Last one to talk about very quickly, kind of the poster boy of the channel. Anytime I make a comic book video, I feel like I have to talk about it. New Mutants 98. Same thing. This thing spiked up back in February and March. Got way up to almost over $3,000, I believe, in some parts in time. Let me see what the peak was here. Yeah, definitely got up to 27, lots of 27s, 27, 3, 28, 29, 3, 29. But it has pulled all the way back, and I believe this is one that has settled into its new floor as well. When I bought mine, it was $1,000. I got it for just over 1,000, and I bought it just in the nick of time. I think this actually might be mine right here. I think I paid. Oh, maybe it's this one. I bought it in early January for a little over $1,000. Actually, I might have bought mine off eBay now that I think about it. But regardless, I paid a little over $1,000. I bought it right back in this range. And this is when New Mutants 98 is when the light bulb went off for me. And that's when it clicked that it was a lot of people really like Deadpool. That census count of 3,000 that scares a lot of the comic book community off seems pretty low to me. And that's when I pulled the trigger on it. And I'm glad I did. I said, I have to get, it was one of those things where it was right place, right time. Yeah, I could have got it sooner. But luckily the light bulb went off when it did. And I pulled the trigger when I did because it immediately, I think I was one of the last ones to get it at around $1,000. Because I feel like as soon as I got it, it immediately started shooting up. And then it was like, oh, okay, the next one went for 1,200. And then the next one went for 1,300. And the next one went for 1,400. And like I said, this got all the way up to $3,000, and it took about a month or two. And a lot sold in that price range for between $2,000 and $3,000, and some even over 3,000. Lots of 26s, 27s, 28s, all through April and May. And then recently, it has pulled back down, and essentially over the last month and a half has really leveled out at about $2,000. There's been some sales under, like you can see all these, a ton of high 1900s, just over twos, 18 to 2100, So since about mid-June, it's basically been a 2K book. And this is going to be another one. I have mine already, so I'm good. But I have a feeling the conversation that I just had about X-Men 266, a lot of people are having about this. Oh, New Mutants 98 is $2,000 all day. I'll grab one eventually. This book's not going anywhere. It's going to keep slowly doing what it's doing. It's going to have spikes when trailers come out and news comes out and movies comes out. It's going to shoot way up. Then it's going to pull back, and the pullback is going to be at the old floor. We see this in sports cards all the time, and I think we're going to start seeing it in the comic book market as well. You know, here's the big spike, then it pulled back, and then it levels out at the new price. Go back to the first Deadpool movie coming out. There's the spike, then it leveled off at its new floor, dipped a little bit, and then the second Deadpool movie came out, and rinse and repeat the same thing. And we're going to keep seeing these level ups. So the trick is not to buy in these sections. It's to wait for it to pull back again and now re-level off. So in my opinion, we are in a re-level off with New Mutants 98 at around 2K. So if you want one, now's a good time to get one. Because at some point in time, something is going to happen and cause this book to do the exact same thing again and go on a mini spike. It'll spike up. Maybe it goes from 2,000 to 3,000. Things cool off again. It comes back down, but it levels out at 2,500 then. Rinse and repeat. Shoots up to 3,500 4K when Deadpool 6 comes out. Pulls back, drops another $500 to $1,000, levels off, but at a higher floor than what it was at before. Rinse and repeat. And Ryan Reynolds has signed up to play Deadpool for a while. He's going to be an extremely popular character. I have a feeling he's going to show up in a ton of other different things as random cameos. He could be, and this is going to be a semi-weird comparison, he could be like the Robert Downey Jr., but for the X-Men, where, Iron Man would show up in like all these random movies. I can easily see Deadpool doing the same thing for the X-Men side of things, where he just randomly shows up in movies. I wouldn't be surprised if we see him in one of the upcoming either Spider-Man or Doctor Strange movies. With the multiverse stuff in play now, I would not be surprised if we get Ryan Reynolds popping out of the corner of the screen, dropping some witty one-liner, and then it's gone. And boy, would that cause stuff to go nuts again. So, once again, do your own homework, do your own research. But to me, New Mutants 98 is one of the safest modern books that there is out there. And I think if you really want one and you don't get one at this current price floor, you're probably going to be kicking yourself in a few years as it keeps doing these like level ups, if you will. This is what I was talking about. These books just have such high floors that, yeah, even if you bought in the peak here at 2.5 to 3K, as long as you weren't looking to make a quick buck out of it, and you're saying, okay, I'm just going to go set that on the shelf. It's going to look great in the office for 5 years. The value is going to catch back up again. I just truly think it does on at least those key blue chip books like that. Some of the more random stuff, maybe not the case, but the true blue chippers, and I do put New Mutants 98 in that class. I think it's a modern blue chip, right up there with ASM 300 and a lot of that other stuff like that. So that's all I got for you guys and girls today. If you have any questions, comments, whatever, put it down below. Smash the like button, subscribe if you haven't, and we will catch you on the next one. Peace.